Welcome to the Eternal ROI Podcast, where we share the real stories of workplace transformation. And now, here are your hosts, Will Stewart and Chris Patton.
Welcome to the Eternal ROI Podcast. Good to have everybody watching and listening along. I'm Will Stewart, joined as always by the CEO of His Way at Work, Chris Patton. Hey, Chris.
Will, how are you?
Doing fantastic.
Man, I'm having a great day.
Yeah. Looking
forward to this episode. We are interviewing a friend of mine, Mary Beth Sutkowski, and she and her husband Bob have I guess it's a group of medical clinics around Chicago area, and she has been I would say a friend of His Way at Work for many years, even before I got here, and they do tremendous work there. Got a chance to go to Rome with her back in last fall. A group of 10 or 12 of us, and Kim and I enjoyed the time with she and Bob and several other couples. So it was a really cool connection there. But I want to hear some stories from her, so I'd like to go and jump into that.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's bring her in. Hey, Mary Beth, how are you?
Hello, how are you?
Great. Thanks for coming onto the show. We appreciate it.
Absolutely.
So for the people who don't know who you are, aren't familiar with what you guys do, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, well, I am born and bred for the most part in the Midwest. So Illinois is where I come from. Actually, I was born in Michigan, but Illinois for the most part. And my husband and I started up this company, Paragon Clinical, about almost a decade, 9 years, almost a decade ago. And basically the essence, I'm a physician. So physician, always loved working with the elderly, internist by training. But about 9 years ago, was approached by a doctor from the East Coast who needed help running his company. So I joined him, and then actually within just a year, with no business background, we just decided to go for it and buy the company. And God was with us pretty much from day one. So we provide nurse practitioners for basically nursing homes. So everybody knows what a nursing home is, long-term care facility. You saw it on the news during COVID, all those kind of dark places. So that's what we do. We provide nurse practitioners, which are mid-level providers, not doctors, not nurses, but they can go in and prescribe medications, work with the doctor, and take care of the patients in nursing homes. So elderly, vulnerable people, I'd say.
That's awesome. So your mindset when it comes to work and bringing Jesus into the work is different than a lot of people. Some businesses, they try to keep the two separate. What was the first kind of moment as you're building the company and thinking about it, when you thought, well, we need to start thinking about our faith and our work and bringing that in together?
Yeah, so the way God orchestrated it, which is like to say, because I had nothing to do with this, almost immediately as the company was gotten by us, or the inception, I would say, we met Armando from His Way at Work. So His Way at Work is a nonprofit company that really helps direct you in bringing Christ to the workplace. So almost to the, I don't want to say minute, to the days or a few weeks, it happened simultaneously. And so I felt like from the very beginning, God was saying, I'm going to give this to you. And Bob and I were both, it was so new for us. I mean, right, I'm in medicine, he's an engineer. Who would think we'd be running a business? But God said, I'll give this to you if you do it my way. So simultaneous with giving us the company, He gave us the introductions to Armando and His Way at Work and that kind of. So that was it. We had they held our hand the whole way with this. So from the beginning. So it wasn't even like I had to do anything to make this happen. As always, we kind of look back and say, oh, wow, look what God did. Look what God did. Look what God did. So God was the one doing it.
That's awesome. I love that. It's amazing how God will put that vision in your heart, but then He'll also give you the tools to accomplish it, and His timing is perfect and all that. So when you hear from God saying, hey, I want you to, combine these two worlds, bring me in with what we're doing, the thing that I'm making you a steward of, was there fear, doubt, what worry? What were the emotions that you were feeling, and what did that mean to you initially? As far as what did that mean to bring Christ into the workplace?
Yeah, I had all of those emotions. So definitely, because I would say 20 years ago, 25 years ago, when I first became a doctor, I first started seeing patients. Honestly, I knew I had to do well to be a doctor. I knew I had my faith at home, in church, but I would never think to bring it to the workplace. So even before I met His Way at Work and we got started with the company, just an aside, my friend and I started a group in Chicago called Catholic Professionals of Illinois. So that was a group that we started for that very reason. I remember literally one moment driving down the street looking at all these offices, looking at hospitals at 8:00 at night thinking, wow, the lights are still on. People are still there. Like, how is God going to reach these people? If they don't have a church, and if they don't have a church family, and if they don't have a school that's Christian, like how are they going to find God? Because that's how we felt supported, and how would these people do? So I think I had an inspiration probably 10 years ago to do something. So we started up that group, and then within a year, we got Paragon, and then we met His Way at Work. So it was all kind of simultaneous. But I had all those feelings of, how do I go about this? The fear, are people going to sue me? Are they going to leave? Things like that, which is why I think when I was a physician early on, the thought of praying with a patient, or praying for a patient, yes, but praying with a patient and like bringing that into the workplace, it was just not even a thought that I would ever think of. So I think the biggest thing that this did for me was, yes, you can. So courage, I think it gave me to, yes, I can. And with His Way at Work, kind of like I said, holding our hand, we just did one thing after another, and we saw awesome results.
That's incredible.
Did that answer your question? I know.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, it really did. Absolutely did. So what were the first steps? What were some of the things where you said, we want to start bringing Christ in the workplace? What did you do?
So the first thing we did was we actually ended up at a conference in Guatemala, of all places, about 9 years ago. We flew. We hadn't done a lot of international travel. So my two sons that were probably 10 and 12 and 14 at the time, we all got our passports because we were doing another international trip. But this came up 2 months before, so we all flew out. Armando invited us, so we went out to see a big His Way at Work conference in Guatemala. And I just remember sitting in the audience, looking at these business owners standing up there with their wife and their children, and proclaiming that their company is all for God and this kind of thing. And this is the first time I ever saw anybody talk like this, ever. And I was just like, Bob and I were both like sitting in our seats going, this is surreal. Like, I remember thinking, this can't be happening. And it was happening. So I think that was our initial experience. And from there, I mean, that is the inspiration for everything. So that the seeing people be courageous and be really on fire for God and doing this for God it was everything. So we started there, and then from there we worked with His Way at Work, and we hired a corporate chaplain. So that was step one. And that whole idea of even that, bringing a chaplain to the workplace, like how do you do that? And we just did it. And I mean, right now he sends out weekly Bible, verses to all of our employees, and he's at all of our meetings, and we pray before our meetings. I mean, this is all just what we do every day now, and it's not even a thought of, do we have to worry about this, or all that fear has been taken away. But it started with the corporate chaplain, and then do you want me to tell more details? Or
oh yes, I love it.
Okay. And then we sat down with them and had a couple of meetings. So they helped us develop our mission. So I actually have a card here. So I'm going to actually read our mission because we worked really hard to do this. And I think until you develop a mission and core values, you don't have anywhere to go. So I think you need a mission and core values, because for us today, that's where we keep going back to. Like, how did I handle this employee at work? Let me go back to my core values or my mission. How did I handle that patient? I mean, you just like any core values, right? If you don't have something that is your focal point that you can always go back to as the steer, it's easy to get distracted. Yeah. So we work together to develop this as our mission. We're highly trained and compassionate nurse practitioners and physicians. We partner with skilled nursing and assisted living facilities to transform them into hospital-grade medical services. Our comprehensive programs, which include primary care, palliative care, and education, help to create an environment in which our patients and clients feel valued and cared for. We honor God by putting the dignity of the person at the center of everything we do. So even putting God on my business card was huge. We had a lot of fear about that. Do we do this or not? Peter tells the story, right? Is he going to lose customers because of this? And we just went ahead and did it. We didn't even think twice because we already made the decision to be connected with God. So therefore, everything else is just secondary. But we did that. And then we came up with our 5 core values. And Sheila Burrows has been our coach all along, and we met with our key leadership. We all got together for a day, had a retreat, and all together, which is great, having everybody in the company work together so everybody buys into your core values. We developed our 5 core values, and then from there, everything was around that. How do we interview people? What are we looking for? The core values. When we evaluate people, how do we evaluate them based on our core values and our mission? Yeah. So it just was easy after that. It's like they helped us put all the building blocks in place, and then
that's awesome.
Yeah.
So fast forward 8-9 years from there, and you said so many things you listed that you guys just do on a day-to-day basis. What are some examples? Give us a story, something that says, okay, out of those core values from 9 years ago, we just had something happen last week or last month or last year with a particular employee or a particular situation. Give us some practical example of what you're doing that reaches back to those core values of that mission.
Yeah. So the first core value that comes to mind, and not surprising in healthcare, is compassion. So the first core value that everybody resonated with is we need to be compassionate. And by nature of healthcare, I think most people in healthcare are compassionate. So that was that. And I think what we did, organically, obviously besides taking care of our patients in that way, is our employees. So we did have a particular employee who was suffering with cancer. This was a woman who worked for us actually only part-time. So literally she was clocking in a couple of days a month for us. But she was just had a baby. I think her third child, 3 months old or something, was diagnosed with cancer, and had three little children under 5 at home, and with this horrible diagnosis. And we just, I think because of our core values, we reached out to her, phone calls, and can we do anything for you? Maybe sent gift cards and maybe a meal or two, those kind of things. And she responded in an unbelievable way. Actually, years later, she responded to the point where we had a Christmas party, and she called me up and said, "Can I please be a speaker at your Christmas party?" We don't really have speakers at our Christmas parties. I'm like, you know what? If you feel that called to do this, let's have a speaker this year.
Wow.
So we brought her in, and she was the speaker for we knew she was going to say something good, of course, but we didn't know exactly. She just wanted to say thank you. But she stood up there for, 30 minutes and talked about just the caring environment, how she has never seen this before, that she had a full-time job somewhere. We were her part-time gig, but we showed more care and love for her than her full-time people. And just that she just can't say enough about how literally we and all the love of our community got her through her cancer and her cancer treatment and everything like that. So that's one story of how just employing our core value of compassion, and really living it.
And to your point, that's with someone who's part-time, couple days a month, that in a typical business, not intentionally, but is going to be overlooked, right?
Exactly.
You're thinking about, well,
Right.
I've got my employees, and then I've got some temp people, I've got some part-timers, and those come and go. So, I know some of their names, that kind of thing. But you guys went all the way as if she was one of your full-time employees.
Exactly. Right. So that's where our paradigm is more around the dignity of the human person versus some economical or, they're devoted to us this much, so we'll be devoted to them that much. There's nothing like that. It's about each individual mattering. And I think everybody was struck with just this woman with 3 young children and having cancer. And it was a pretty advanced cancer as well. So I think the compassion just kind of bled out, if I can use the word bled out everywhere and consumed everybody.
Wow.
I love that. And I love that you have a culture where there's people who would care, because it's interesting when you hire and you hold people accountable based off of values, then whenever you come to them saying hey, we need to be compassionate toward this person, you're going to be in a room with other people who believe in compassion and believe that that's important. So that's great. What was the reception like when you first started rolling out all of this? And then as, things were growing, and I'm sure there was points you had to finesse and, you don't get it right the first time and all that. What was the response of the employees, partners or leadership in the company? Kind of how did that fall out?
Yeah, so everyone is, even to this day, I would say there's people in our leadership just at different places in their faith. They're not all, really devout, I would say, Christians necessarily, but they're on the walk. So no one has ever been resistant to what we've done. I think one thing that we learned from Sheila and some other people is that everything's voluntary. So even to pray, before we pray at all of our meetings, our chaplain will say, I want to invite you to pray. You can leave the room. You can put your head down. You can do whatever you want. You don't have to do this. So I think we really, from the very beginning, this is only voluntary. It doesn't affect your work. It doesn't affect promotions. It doesn't affect evaluations. It's just something we're doing. So people respected that this is a faith-based company. So if they want to leave, they can. Nobody has left, though. That's interesting. Not one person has ever left because of the faith. And that was my biggest fear at the beginning. They're going to, not only are they going to leave, they're going to sue us. I was imagining all these lawsuits because of God in the environment, and not one single one. I do remember one, episode with an employee when we had that whole day retreat that we were actually, Sheila was there, I think, and we were actually putting up God. We were putting up Bible verses. And I remember sitting there feeling a little nervous because it was quite a bit. And she came up to me afterward and she just said, I really don't feel comfortable with us talking about God and this kind of stuff. And I think I actually went to the bathroom and I just started praying. I just said, God, I had no idea what to say back to her, not one single thing. And all that he flooded me with at that moment was be humble, like humility. Just go back to her with humility. And I did. More humble. I can be humble and I cannot be humble sometimes. But I was like so humble at this moment. I don't even know where it came from, but I was just almost apologizing to her, like, I don't want to offend you, this or that, but this is just like how I feel. This is important to me. Like I was literally talking like on that level. And she just looked at me. She said, okay, well, I respect that. Or I don't remember what the words were, but she's totally fine. So nothing happened with that. She stayed with the company for years. So, I don't know, just those kind of one-on-one experiences. But honestly, that is the only time I remember anybody coming up to me to kind of confront me on what we were doing here with faith. Never have I really had anything else. So maybe God's just blessed me, but I doubt it. I think it's because, like you said, it just really works, Chris. You said that, right? This works, right? The Holy Spirit knows how to work. He knows how to touch souls. He knows who to, when and how to do that. So we're just following along.
That's awesome.
What have the last 2 years been like in the healthcare business?
Yeah, horrendous. We saw, when you saw those pictures on the news of them rolling out people dying left and right, like that was our nursing home population. So we had business in a couple other states. One state, there was several nurse practitioners who literally, I don't want to say had a breakdown, but like they just couldn't deal with it anymore. Like patients were hanging over their beds, needing water, and they were passing out, and they were literally being rolled out in carts, and there wasn't enough staff. I mean, with COVID, everyone exited. A lot of people exited out of fear, whatever. They couldn't get enough people to come back in. So the patients that were there were obviously sick. They were getting COVID. So it was depressing. It was discouraging. But I would have to say at our company, we all stuck together, and we took the time to meet with employees. How are you feeling? How are you doing with this? Just taking our time to get into the dirty mix of it all, and just try to take one person at a time and help them through it. But we had a big fallout. Definitely a lot of employees left. They just couldn't work in this anymore. So,
wow. How did the culture that you created in the past, however many years ago that was, prepare your company for the crisis that you faced with this pandemic?
I think, again, courage and faith. So I think just knowing that we know we have the answer. God already established all that for us. We just have to stick to it. So I talked about the core values and our faith, just making that always the goal, no matter what happens around us, no matter who walks out, no matter how discouraging it can be. We just kept going back to Christ and, like I said, our core values and our mission, and just kept that at the forefront. And sometimes people walked away and sometimes they didn't. So we were left with a core we were down probably 40%, 45%, which I think was pretty typical for every company that was hit, was affected probably like that, if not 50%. So we were just left with that. And it was just, I felt like the people that stayed, we got even tighter and they were even more dedicated. I guess that makes sense, right? Purification. I think this is a purifying experience for us. So it really kind of the people that were maybe not as strong left. And then the people that are here stay remaining with us even now. So I think just huge. I keep going back to the core value of the mission because that's what we keep going back to. Because everyone isn't a fervent Christian like say we are. So some people we have working for us that are atheists, agnostics, Buddhists. We have everyone, and so the common denominator is that I care about you. That you're important to me. That's the common denominator. That's the thing that everybody can relate to, and they will stay with us for that.
I think something worth mentioning, Mary Beth, and I think you probably know this and assume it, but I want to bring it out and point it out to those listening. You came into a business, you bought an existing business, you introduced God into that business in a pretty dramatic way, all in. You have non-Christians listed, Buddhist, atheists, so forth, that are with you. 9 years later, those people are still in an environment where they're hearing about someone they don't believe in or believe in differently, and yet they're staying instead of running for the hills. Because there are jobs in healthcare. I mean, they can go find a job tomorrow, right, if they want it. Because, like you said, the fallout.
Especially now.
Especially now. So what is not said, but I want to bring out is, how in the world do you explain that kind of a culture, except that God's working through you and through your leadership in humility, but just in loving people? You know, we're talking about businesses, not just in healthcare, but we're trying to point out to business owners, your business and your employees, that's your mission field. And this is where you can love on people. And if you bring God in, they don't just suddenly scatter. These are people that need love. They're desperate for it. And you're sitting here telling us kind of off the cuff, yeah, we've got so many different atheists, non-believers, Buddhists, whatever, and yet they're still there in a very Christian environment. I mean, that's a big deal.
Yeah,
It really is.
Yes, exactly. So for me, there's no other answer to that than I'm a scientist, right? So there's no other answer to that other than equals Holy Spirit, right? There is no other answer. There is no other answer, and I think that's what that affirms to me over and over and over. That especially I'm seeing it through the eyes of like our caring team, which is a team that we have, you know, that's a group of people representative of different facets of the company. And just to sit there and watch them literally care about other people, to actually put it in their court. So I just sit there and I say nothing, and I'm an advisor, so I say nothing. I just watch it happen. And it is happening completely independent of me, right? Which makes, you know, there is an entity at work here that is not me, and it's not them humanly. It's something else. And it's so obvious to me to sit here and watch it, just to watch how excited they get about, you know, ideas. Well, let's do this to help. Well, let's do this to help. Like, look at this. Like, they're all excited about like how more they can help our employees. This is on their off time. They're not getting paid extra for this. Even my facilitator of the caring team, one of our nurse practitioners who's very part-time, I go back to the part-timers again, we lost our facilitator, and she actually volunteered and said, and everyone knows we're kind of suffering with COVID. She said, you know what, you don't even have to pay me. Can I just do this? And I said, why? Like, that's wild. Like, tell me why. Like, you want to do this without pay? Like, I just want to get her story. And she said, it's because you guys cared about me. Don't you remember? Like, a few years ago, like, I had surgery or I had this or I had that, and you guys kept calling and you kept bringing me in and you kept caring about me. And for that reason alone, I want to do this, and you don't have to pay me for it. So those kind of behaviors, the essence of that, in my mind, could be nothing but the Holy Spirit. That's what it is. I can't take credit for it at all. In the more days that go on that I see this happening, the more I realize how much I cannot take credit for this.
Yeah.
I know that makes sense.
No, it makes perfect sense. And I know how good you are at what you do, but you're not a good enough salesperson to convince with your words an atheist, a Buddhist, and whoever to stay in the company when jobs are available galore. And you're convincing them, stay, even though we talk about God, we just want you can't do it. Yep. You're not convincing enough. Yep. There's got to be more to it.
Exactly.
And clearly we know what that is, but that's exciting. Any examples?
And the dignity of the...
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No,
I was just going to say that, you know, the dignity of the human person, which is one of our missions, which is actually, in essence, being a Christian, right? You respect the sacredness of each person because God lives in each person. But even just that, by us saying you don't have to do this, we respect how you feel. Even just that, even saying you don't have to, so don't do what we're doing, that in and of itself is the conviction. It was what convicts them. So, yeah, sorry to interrupt you.
No, I was just going to say, give us some examples out of just even simple things out of the caring team that you've observed either in the last year or two through some of the real challenges as COVID's hitting hard, or otherwise. Just what comes to mind there?
So I think for us, you know, because we have, it's not always the financial aspect, because our MPs are generally paid pretty well and they're in pretty good. So, you know, fixing a car or fixing a roof, that wouldn't necessarily be something our MPs need. But what speaks to this population, it literally is care. It's like sending the cards, sending the flowers, giving them an extra few days off because they're just going through so much, and we're not sticking just by the book necessarily. We're calling them up and saying, what do you need? So it's those kind of things. Let me think. Recently, I told you about that one employee. Well, this isn't actually the caring team, but we had a couple of employees come to us from references. So organic growth of employees, right? We really need nurse practitioners now because there aren't, as you know, shortages everywhere. We can't get enough NPs right now. But what is working for us is the organic growth from references from our current NPs. So we had an NP recently who brought 2 NPs he just happened to be at a nursing home sitting side by side another NP who worked for another group, and literally just naturally, organically talking about how great Paragon is, how we really care. And the other person is saying, I'm being stressed out. They're working me too hard. Nobody really cares. So I think just that all of a sudden those 2 people just like came over to Paragon. So it's simple as that. I was we had a dinner in the fall. We took everybody out on a boat ride on Navy Pier. And I had a police officer come up to me and he said, Dr. Sutkowski, you have to come talk to me. I said, sure. Like what? And he said, I have to let you know, like, whatever you're doing here, like this doesn't happen like everywhere else. I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, I've been in the Chicago police force for, 35 years and they don't do this kind of stuff. They don't really care. You're just a number. And this is so awesome. Like he talked for literally 10 minutes about this topic. So I know it impressed him for sure. Right. So those are the stories, right. That people just, that is a sign how uncommon this still is. I guess that is a sign how much work we have yet to do because people are so amazed. We think it's everything because this is what we do every day. We love God. It's all jiving. It makes sense with us. But for people on the outside, this is all foreign. So that is the cool thing.
Mary Beth, that's such a big point right there. So you made a comment earlier. You said, talking about humility and compassion. Well, I mean, and the dignity of the human person. Well, that's the Christian thing to do. And it is on Sunday.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
But unfortunately, the miss that most of us have is when I walk into business on Monday, I can't be that person. I've got to be somebody else because one, business, you can't succeed if you're soft. And they're equating these things we're talking about with being soft, or you don't understand my competition would eat me alive if I started talking about God in the workplace. That's crazy. So yes, it should be a Christian description, but unfortunately, Monday to Friday or Monday to Saturday is completely missing in so many businesses when it shouldn't be. And you're an example here of someone who just dove in. I mean, frankly, I'd just say you didn't know any better. You just you jumped
exactly
in, right. You just said, "All right."
That's an understatement,
isn't it? And I know you well enough to know that's not an insult. You see how I mean that.
Absolutely, yes.
But what you're doing and what other business owners are doing as a very small population of all Christians that own or run or lead businesses is so uncommon and unfortunately rare because we've been taught to keep these things separate. Not only have we been taught, but the world says, the media says, man, if you even begin to combine these two, faith and work, then you're just begging to be on the news and be sued. Just the very things you're thinking 9 years ago, and that was frankly in a much easier environment than today.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. So the biggest thing I think I've learned is that there isn't that big roadblock that I thought there was, right? Before I even invested, I just thought we just can't do it. But when you're talking, the word that comes to me is simplicity. It's about having a simple heart. So I'm going to reference my youngest son, who's part of a Catholic movement. And he has told me on more than one occasion recently, actually, and it melds completely with what we're doing here. And he said, it's all about simplicity. It's between you and Jesus Christ. And it's just about living. He keeps using the word ordinary life. It's like we are just ordinary people living ordinary lives. And the only thing that makes us different than a non-believer is that we are looking at God and we are striving to be holy in everything we do. It sounds simple, but for me, being able to get rid of that divider that you talk about, for me, the only way to really overcome that, like extremely easily, is to have an undivided life and an undivided love for God, right? It's like if you had a best friend, you wouldn't say, oh yeah, I'll be your best friend like at these 3 parties, but when I go to these 3 parties, like I don't know you. Like don't take it personally.
Unless you're in high school.
But, yeah, exactly. Whatever the case is. I'm so glad I'm out of high school. Anyways, so that's what I mean. It's the first choice is Jesus Christ. And if you're serious about that, then there won't be any obstacles in life. And this is one that definitely is not there.
Yeah.
But it's about sincerity too, right? So if you go in the room with your employees and you have an ego about you, people can read through that like very quickly, right? So this isn't sincere. This is about you with your agenda, and it has to be you, or whatever the case may be. So I think, so my son tells me, who's 22, you have to be right with God first. Don't look about changing other hearts if you're not holy. Work on your own holiness yourself first, and work on your own relationship with God first. That is the goal, and everything else is up to God. Everything else is up to God. So it sounds kind of simple, but that helps me.
Yes.
Your son's very wise.
Yep.
Very wise.
It's the truth.
So if for any business leaders who are perhaps listening to this episode and they're not sure exactly where to begin, they don't know what that first step is, they feel kind of a tugging on their heart, what would be your recommendation? If you were sitting across the table from them, what would you say to them?
Well, if they believe in God at all, start praying. Number one, start praying if you do believe in God. I'm assuming that's what you're asking here, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I would say seek out wise counsel, like seek out the people that you value in terms of faith life and, Christian, if that's what we're talking about here. And I would seek advice from them and pray. And I would just say, God will provide, just like he provided for us. When his way at work came around, it came through my husband, through Armando. He had been in Chicago. They had been out with some guys, and Bob came home and threw it on the kitchen table and said, look, this is his way at work. What do you think? And I was really busy, and I looked at him like, yeah, we'll see. And I kind of threw it aside. Then my spiritual director, a priest, said same thing. It was weird. It was like within 4 weeks, he was mentioning his way at work. I'm like, okay, if two people are telling me maybe I should look into this. So I started to look into it. But that's how it happened with me. But it was, who did it come from? My husband, who's a very faithful Christian, and my spiritual director. So that's how it came to me. So I would think that God will choose those people. So I guess just be open. I think you won't see God in your life if you're not open to seeing him. So I would say be humble and open and look in every moment of your life how God, because I think he's talking to us a lot more than we recognize.
Wow.
So
yes.
we have to be open to hearing him. Yeah.
That's great advice. I love that. What's the piece of advice that you wish you would have been given 10 years earlier?
Oh,
I think having more trust in God and courage. So I think trust and faith in God. I think before 10 years ago, I've been a Christian from way back. So I was born and raised. But I think just being able to really more fervently embrace it, and like we're talking about living it in every aspect of my life, that's what I wasn't doing. So I think to just be courageous about that and have no barriers, just keep looking at him and moving forward. So courage and faith, and be not afraid. I guess that would be pretty fundamental.
That's good. Is there a resource like a book or a podcast, something that you'd recommend people read or listen to?
Yeah, I was just thinking about that. Honestly, I read a lot of spiritual books, saints and things like that. There's one that's actually just it's a spiritual exercises book, St. Ignatius. It's just a very little handbook, but it's a way to kind of look at you look at this like spiritual exercise, like every day of your life, you're asking yourself, at the end of the day, it's accountability. It's kind of accountability in your life. So I guess it's a very easy book. You can get it on Kindle or wherever, but St. Ignatius Spiritual Exercises, and it's a very small book, but every day you could read it. It's just about being accountable, because like we measure our company. If you don't measure it, you don't do it, right? So if we're not measuring our behavior every day, if we're not looking back, what could I have done better yesterday? How are we going to improve if we don't acknowledge our sins to begin with? So for me, that has been a powerful, inspirational book, just from a very practical standpoint.
Yeah, love that.
Good.
Love practical.
Because I do make a few mistakes.
as we all do, right?
Yeah.
We'll put that book in the show notes so people can get a link to that and go find it for themselves. So last question, what's the big takeaway from the day? What's the thing that you want people to walk away knowing from this episode?
Don't turn your back on your friend, Jesus. He's number one. So just go with him. Don't be afraid. The biggest obstacle, I think, to this kind of thing happening in our workplace is us telling ourselves on a human level why it won't work. What are we afraid of? Why we can't, before we get to the point of we don't have to focus on that. We just focus on Christ. It sounds simple, but it is the way and I think the more times you do it confidently and courageously and you see the success, it really gets rid of all that discouragement, It's like getting rid of a phobia. Do you know how you get rid of a phobia? Like if you have a fear of bees, you just keep going in a room and they keep adding more and more bees until you realize there's nothing wrong with these bees. This is a little bit different. Maybe that wasn't a good example. But it's just the more success I've had over the years where, hey, I just had a meeting. We just prayed. We just did this. And you know what? Nobody left. I'm thinking of a meeting now that we had some drug reps who came to our meeting. Like these are people I really don't even know. I had one call with them and they're at the meeting and we all just started praying. And for a minute, I'm like, oh my gosh, like there's somebody brand new here. I don't even hardly know this person. Do you know they just put their heads down and started praying? Like there was not even an obstruct anything. So I think seeing those examples is like, what are we afraid of?
Yeah.
Good.
Oh, that's good. I love that. Mary Beth, this has been incredibly inspirational. I really appreciate your humility and just sharing your story, your successes and failures. It's been great getting to know you, and I'm so glad we can share your story with our audience, and I know it's going to be an inspiration to many. So thank you so much for your time and taking the time to talk to us.
Absolutely. Thank you both.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Eternal ROI. If you like what you heard, we would love for you to take a moment and leave us a review and share an episode with somebody you know. If you are inspired to begin bringing the power of God's love into your workplace, take a moment and check out our free assessment at hwaw.com. It'll only take you a few moments. It'll give you a snapshot of what your company looks like and maybe some ways to move forward. Just click on the link in the show notes, and we'll see you next time.